Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. So, the stories that have been going around is that Harry's looking for a place in the UK, and some are speculating, is it because he is wanting to move his family back there? No, I don't think so. I think it has a lot to do with this counselor of state, but I also think he realizes that he could be in some real hot water with the work that he has been doing or had been doing with Aspen Institute and censoring Americans. Let's not forget that there's a lot of scrutiny going on right now over Harry's visa, and I think that things are now going to be unraveling should Samantha's case move forward. God willing, this case moves to discovery, it's going to come out Harry's involvement with trying to get people censored and kicked offline. And we all know that there had been targeted campaigns against many people, including Samantha, to be deplatformed, in which we all witnessed and saw. And since the Twitter files had been exposed this year, it had been revealed that Prince Harry was a part of this censorship industrial complex. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about and want a little more background, I created a playlist and 3 videos that do cover this in depth. But at a high level, this censorship industrial complex is a network of government agencies, academic institutions, and NGOs that are censoring ordinary citizens on a whole host of issues. And what is now being exposed is that governments of democracies have been censoring and deplatforming ordinary citizens. We have been seeing this in Ireland, to Germany, Canada, to Mexico. All these laws now trying to be passed through in stifling people's free speech. The US is the biggest country to be toppled in passing legislation that aligns with a lot of these European countries that have been passing these kinds of restriction laws. I've said this before, these are the organizations that are part of this censorship industrial complex in which Meghan and Harry are directly, heavily involved with, particularly Harry and the Aspen Institute and being on that commission for disinformation disorder nonsense. Now, I'm going to continue to keep bringing this up whenever I talk about the censorship industrial complex. Harry is on record stating that he knew about a coup, January 6th, happening the day before. So why hasn't anybody from our government pulled him in for questioning?
Prior to January the 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. That email was sent the day before, and then it happened, and I haven't heard from him since.
Participating in that global broadcast with Harry was former CIA head researcher at Stanford University, technical advisor on the Aspen Institute Commission for Disinformation, and at Prince Harry and Meghan's disposal, Renee DiResta. She, as well as Alex Stamos, who was also another commissioner in which Harry collaborated with, are getting sued in Louisiana and in Texas for violating Americans' First Amendment rights. Well, folks, it looks like the house of cards is crumbling because as of October 18th, Aspen Institute now has been slapped with a lawsuit, tagging on to the one with Renee DiResta and Alex Stamos. In the court filing now, it's updated to say, bullet number 36, on information and belief, the individuals, defendants Stamos and DiResta, Starbird, Francois, and Brookie, have been and or are personally involved with directing and controlling the censorship activities that impact Jill Hines and Jim Hawk. Those are the plaintiffs. Defendant, the Aspen Institute, is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., and with campuses in Aspen, Colorado, and Wye River, Maryland. On information and belief, in 2019, the Aspen Institute had net assets of over $310 million. Bullet number 38. A 2019 report by The Economist magazine described the Aspen Institute, which sponsors week-long seminars and an annual 10-day Ideas Festival favored by celebrities, business leaders, and politicians, as the mountain retreat for the liberal elite. Continuing on, it says, on information and belief, the Aspen Institute brings together senior government officials and key private sector individuals for government-private collaboration on issues like government-induced censorship. The Aspen Institute receives funding from both the federal government and social media platforms like Facebook. Bullet number 39. According to his CSAC biography, defendant Alex Stamos serves as a member of the Aspen Cybersecurity and Information Disorder Commissions. In 2022, CISA's Cybersecurity Advisory Committee noted that CISA is discussing opportunities for collaboration with Aspen on cybersecurity issues. So, now let's talk about some of the activities that go on at the Aspen Institute. Bullet number 40 says, on information and belief, the Aspen Institute has a history of conspiring with federal officials to squelch freedom of expression of private citizens on social media. For example, the Aspen Institute conducted notorious tabletop exercises in conjunction with federal officials to squelch the Hunter Biden laptop story. A prominent think tank funded by billionaire supporters of President Joe Biden colluded with social media companies and journalists to minimize news coverage of Hunter Biden's emails before the 2020 election, internal Twitter documents show. Reportedly, the Aspen Institute convened a working group of social media executives, journalists, and academics to develop a coverage strategy for a hypothetical hack and dump of Hunter Biden's emails, according to documents published by independent reporter Michael Schellenberger. A month after the tabletop exercise, the New York Post published emails from Biden's abandoned laptop that detailed his foreign business dealings. Though there is no evidence that the emails were hacked, many of the attendees of the Aspen event censored or downplayed the story. Twitter and Facebook, which were represented at the exercise, suppressed the Post article on their platforms. The New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, and Daily Beast, which were represented by journalists or newsroom executives, either criticized the New York Post report or ignored it. Aspen organizers clearly urge reporters and social media companies to view any explosive stories about Hunter Biden with deep skepticism, echoing and reinforcing the warnings of FBI and CISA to platforms on the same issue that this court has already found to have violated the First Amendment. So I'm going to pause for a second. You see those news outlets that they mentioned? Those are the same news outlets here in the United States that speak favorably of Meghan Markle and downplaying all the lies that they have told. On information and belief, the Aspen Institute's efforts, backed by major donations in 2020 from pro-Biden billionaires, were orchestrated and coordinated with federal officials who pursued the same effort in the same time frame. So now here is where that darn commissioner's report that Harry was a part of writing is coming back to bite him in the ass. Bullet number 42 says, on information and belief, in early August 2021, let's all remember where Harry was. He was playing polo during that same time frame and was out in Colorado. Starbird, meaning Kate Starbird, who was part of the commission, participated in a strategy session with the Aspen Institute on implementing defendants' key censorship priorities. And I'm going to show you that in a second in the exhibit that they provided so you can see who was participating in that. Starbird notes for this in-person meeting with the Aspen Institute, including formulating plans to achieve the following core censorship objectives of the EIP/VP, among others. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second. For those that don't know what this EIP and VP is, let me share with you what it is. So EIP stands for Election Integrity Partnership, or I would call it Election Interference Program, and the VP stands for the Virality Project, probably the largest mass surveillance and mass censorship programs that America has seen in its history. So what is being claimed against these programs is that you have four core entities: Stanford, you have University of Washington, Graphica, and Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Lab, which is somewhere in there, the UK is involved, and collaborates closely with federal, state, and local government officials to monitor and censor disfavored viewpoints on social media. This kind of government-private censorship consortium tramples on First Amendment rights, privacy interests, and business expectations of the Americans. So going back to Aspen's role in helping to achieve these core censorship objectives of these two major mass surveillance programs, that report was part of creating the framework for these platforms to have mechanisms to quickly identify and remove or limit the visibility of harmful content and those who repeatedly spread it before it can cause harm, or what they deem is going to cause harm. So what we saw happening to people getting canceled or not being shadow banned, I mean, during this time when this report was being formulated, we saw so many people from the Megxit community being targeted and taken down or deplatformed. Continuing further in Aspen's participation, helping have clear policies that can be strictly enforced for certain content users, the prior restraint of holding areas for potentially harmful content that gets manually checked before releasing, implement a negligence standard that holds accounts with more visibility to higher standards in regards to transparency and enforcement, have some ability to collaborate with other platforms on censorship, and expand direct government involvement in social media censorship, including having government dictate guidance for platforms around harmful misinformation, and impose mechanisms for holding platforms accountable for harms, including some mechanism for addressing toxic content on long-tail platforms. Exhibit 1959 through 60, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But what I just read out here describes exactly what the Online Safety Bill and the Safety Act in other countries that are being passed. This is exactly what has been happening. And now we're seeing the negative effects of these laws going into place, such as what happened with Russell Brand, with Dan Wooten, Lawrence Fox, Katie Hopkins. I mean, the list is getting longer and longer. As it says here, the Aspen Institute was actively coming up with plans to penalize you for your opinion. So, in the case of plaintiff Jim Hoft, who is in this lawsuit, his entire website was being hit by restricting any other user's ability to post content from that website onto social media. So imagine if people wanted to share or repeat something that you have on your website, they wouldn't be allowed to do so because he was put in the blacklist, kind of similar to what they did to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's the same group or the same complex that had been trying to silence and suppress him as well. But the Aspen Institute was a part of coming up with these plans to penalize people, which ultimately is what Meghan and Harry want to see happen. Look what they did to Meghan's mole. Look what they did to Yankee Wally. It's not even so much giving them the opportunity to keep their community. They literally want them wiped off the face of the earth, which, quite frankly, if Harry and Meghan continue to keep this shit up, a class action is bound to happen. Now, paragraph number 44 is interesting. It says, likewise, Craig Newmark, the billionaire founder of Craigslist and a major Aspen funder who, according to his Wikipedia profile, has funded a 6-month study on misinformation and disinformation by the Aspen Institute Commission on Information Disorder, communicates and coordinates directly with Stamos, DeResta, Starbird, and Vivian Schiller of Aspen Digital regarding the EIP/VP censorship operations. An email chain with Newmark shows Starbird's academic collaborator reporting to Newmark about the EIP/VP plans for censorship during the 2022 midterm election, stating that I have a meeting with Kate soon to talk about midterm monitoring and election response. Starbird follow up with a detailed report to Newmark about the EIP/VP's censorship plans for the 2022 election cycle, stating that EIP/VP's rapid response capacity was currently planning 2022 election efforts, and that at University of Washington, we're quietly assessing capacity to provide some lightweight analysis of narratives and gray propaganda networks. Sounds like Harry might have gotten some of that money since he was a part of this misinformation, disinformation, Aspen Institute Commission Board that produced that shit show of a report. Now, you know who else was a part of these conversation and emails? Safia Noble. Does that name ring a bell? Oh, yes. She was the recipient of the first Archwell NAACP Digital Justice Award and was also in Meghan and Harry's shit flicks supporting Christopher Boozy. And here she is in this email thread. In fact, she's in a lot of email threads for this case, so I'm not sure why she's not being pulled in and being sued, but hey, we could leave that for Samantha's case, or if down the road there is a class action lawsuit with Prince Harry, then she might need to be included, because let's not forget, she did write this article about the community and these so-called single-purpose hate accounts and did support Boozy's Fugazi report spreading super misinformation. I mean, who could forget this bullshit propaganda piece that she wrote for The Cut magazine citing Christopher Boozy's Fugazi work as if it was fact, spreading more misinformation. So, you have this person on this commission, thus helping craft the framework to censor everyone. Maybe Samantha may have to rope Safiya Noble into her lawsuit because, she has been a part of this Sussex ride in alignment with carrying out these narratives of these single-purpose hate accounts and resulting in people getting deplatformed. I think that there's some level of accountability that these people are eventually going to have to face. And I think it's now unraveling as a result of these lawsuits now exposing these organizations that Meghan and Harry have been a part of. Anyhow, feel free to pause this video if you want to read this email through so you can see ACID, aka the Aspen Commission on Information Disorder. How appropriate is that acronym for a group of people who have been corroding society and setting us backwards. Now, what you're seeing here is the work in progress of the outline and framework that they were creating in order to make that report that we all now see and know and have spread out to various governments to influence policy. It's infuriating to me to see that these very same people who are a source of spreading super misinformation want to dictate what the framework's going to look like and what should happen to individuals should they be deemed harmful content or a single-purpose hate account. Like this type of penalization as well as control and putting people in separate compartments if they're not aligned with what they think is supposed to be said online in efforts to make it safer or bullshit, keep control of everyone. What Harry and Meghan did to people online, especially Samantha Markle, needs to come out. You cannot be a part of something like this in creating a framework that's going to control people's thoughts, expressions, but they themselves have been going around terrorizing people and intimidating them, purposely fueling and funding, inciting this online hate. They should be held accountable, and that's why I'm so passionate about staying on top of this court case for Samantha Markle, because this matters to all of us, because these are the people that are trying to take away your rights in the end. Samantha went through a lot of shit, as did others like Yankee Wally, Taz, Murky Meg, Sue Smith, Trevor Colt, Sue Me, Megan's Mole, myself, Duchess of Narsussex. All of us have suffered at the hands of the behind the scenes of what these very same people who are now getting sued had been doing in one way or another to suppress people's speech. Harry's involvement with the Aspen Institute and the people that he had access to, not only from a social media perspective, but also from a governmental perspective, definitely played a role in what we saw during this window of time of people getting canceled and deplatformed. The whole system's corrupt, starting from the top. Aspen Institute is no different.
My name is Vivian Schiller, and I am Executive Director of Aspen Digital, which is a program of the Aspen Institute.
Just to give you a little background on who this woman is, she was caught in a bit of a scandal in 2011 when she was working at NPR and was fired. Fast forward, she's now the head of this division and caught up again within the Twitter files.
Gamed out a whole multi-day event in which they played out a scenario where if something happened to Hunter Biden that showed his shady business dealings with his dad, we would have a game plan in place with the media to respond to it. Okay? I mean, really? This is true. So Michael Schellenberger reporting in the Twitter files, the organizer of this event was Vivian Schiller, the former CEO of NPR, the former head of news at Twitter, former general manager of New York Times, former chief digital officer of NBC News. Attendees included Meta's Facebook head of security policy and the top national security reporters for the New York Times, Washington Post, and others. Now, according to the Daily Caller, the training exercise was titled The Burisma Leak. The Burisma Leak. Like, what a title.
Then I think there's the challenge of, again, on the same front, trust, media, restoring trust in media. I think that media and institutions have communicated in very traditional patterns for a very long time. There's a belief that top-down authority and top-down expertise are how people make sense of the world. And that's just not true in the communication ecosystem that we have today. One of the things that we saw quite a bit in our election integrity work that we're also seeing in our vaccine observations now is the idea of the bottom-up sense making, where instead of seeing information from a trusted authority or institution, you instead see somebody post something to Twitter or to Facebook, and then people begin to investigate or discern what that thing is, how it fits into a broader narrative. And then oftentimes, unfortunately, the narrative turns into a conspiracy theory. So I think the recognition that if people want information about COVID or about elections, the government and authority and mainstream media are not the only sources at their disposal anymore. They can go from this much more bottom-up dynamic. So understanding what's happening within those communities for media and institutions to participate.
So if you really listen to what she's saying, she understands that people are getting their media from other sources that are not controlled at the top, which that was back in the day where the government had more control on the people in whatever that they pushed out for people to see. Now that there's alternate sources, they're losing that type of control. So what's the next thing to do, which is invade people's space and monitoring communications? You're going to hear her say that we have to communicate differently.
I think that we need to see much more of a change in communication style. So not so much journals and PDFs and press conferences, but much more regular, repetitive engagement on within these spaces where people are coming to consensus about things.
And this is Nazi Germany all over again, putting people in the communities, watching, listening, and then saturating the media with nonstop propaganda. And thankfully, we have witnessed this firsthand with Meghan and Harry. So we know that this is not conspiracy, and it's happening, not only with them, but with other topics happening that are being pushed by a certain political agenda. Judgment Day is coming for all these people, including Harry. Don't be surprised if there are more lawsuits that are going to pop up if this case wins. And that's why I'm watching this closely, as well as the Missouri versus Biden and then the other one that had been filed in Texas. I do believe that Samantha's First Amendment rights were violated, especially if Meghan and Harry are behind getting her deplatformed and her Twitter accounts being suspended. This may not be just a case of defamation anymore, but that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? I just wanted to bring this to you as an update so you can see what has been happening now in parallel to what we're seeing with this court case in Samantha. But definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
It was such a fraud.